This week on the weekly Parsha podcast, a rebellion in the wilderness. A mutiny is launched by one individual with some other cohorts and rabble-rousers. They gang up upon the Jewish people's leader. God creates a phenomenon, squashes this rebellion, ultimately backing and solidifying Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron HaKohen's leadership, and then further giving of some mitzvos, some further solidifying of Aaron HaKohen's role, and delineating the certain hierarchy that is in Jewish society. This Parsha gives us a unique opportunity to touch on a yesod, a foundational insight about a topic that is a rather pressing matter, something that Rav Yerucham and Rav Volba would talk about quite frequently. I've hoped that we would have the opportunity to speak about it here on the podcast. And this week, Baruch Hashem, the opportunity has presented itself. So let us get right to it. And then with the Almighty's help, we will conclude with a clarification about labels, about the Torah's perspective, about being given a diagnosis, about someone who is hyperactive, somebody who has anxiety. What would perhaps be the Torah's initial, perhaps, hashkafa on that? So without further ado, welcome in to the weekly Parsha podcast. I hope that you know the story by now, but in case you don't, there's a man, and his name is Korach, and there's a Parsha, and it's named after him. And what happens in the Parsha is that he creates a rebellion. He brings a mob. He kalu, that they gather around Moshe Rabbeinu. They try to overthrow him as the leader. He feels wronged, like he was next in line to be crowned as at a certain capacity of a leader of Klal Yisrael. He felt overlooked. He felt like he was wronged, and something that was rightfully his was taken from him. Therefore, we must fight back. We must take what is rightfully ours. And the first thing that pops to anyone's head about Parshas Korach is undoubtedly the idea of machlokes and how brutal it can be, and the punishments that come along with it, God forbid. One's normal hava amina of the Parsha, what you really think about Korach is he was a man who was kind of crazy, a rasha, a koifer, a denier of Hashem and Moshe Rabbeinu, somebody who just sought power for himself, like someone who was filed to run for president and puts his own quest for honor in front of the people, and he paints it in the form of good intentions, peace, happiness, and love. Someone who is up to no good. Korach, a big rasha, right? But the actual words, and many of the Ma'amari Chazal, paint a totally different picture. There are kama v'kama, countless proofs that Korach indeed had righteous intentions. Korach did, after all, see the Almighty and the fire and the smoke on that mountain named Har Sinai. Korach was actually a nosei Aron. He carried Hashem's ark. Korach is a cousin of Moshe Rabbeinu, but perhaps more than anything, is an open Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that, in describing and searching for the difference between those that fight for the sake of truth, those that start a machlokes for the sake of heaven, and the opposite group, those that just fight for the sake of fighting, those that fight shaloi lishma, the examples given are Hillel and Shammai on the good team, and Korach va'adaso, Korach and his fellow henchmen in the negative, those that just sought to bring machlokes to the nation. People that just wanted more kavod, more honor. But the only difference that is named in Pirkei Avos that describes what separates Hillel and Shammai and Korach va'adaso is that Korach was fighting shaloi lishma. That's it. And Rabbi Yerucham wants to know, what do you mean that's it? He's a rasha. He's a terrible person. the only difference between Hillel and Shammai ve'Korach ve'Adaso is the feeling, is the emotions, are the motives, the shalol lishma aspect. That is all that separates between Korach and Hillel. And Rabbi Yerucham concludes, and this is the first point, that our study of Chumash often gets stuck in first gear. We often learn the weekly Parsha the same way that we have when we were young kids, still with our training wheels on, at a very rudimentary and elementary way. When it comes to other topics of Chachma, other Siforim HaKadoshim, Gemara, and Rambam, topics that perhaps are only touched by a mature head, well then, of course we know and have a new approach and a deeper understanding of what's going on. But when it comes to the Chumash, where many of us studied it when we were younger, in 5th grade, 4th grade, perhaps even younger than that, and whatever we spoke about at the Shabbos table, and God forbid, sometimes we never learn the weekly Parsha with a mature head again. Korach is just always going to be this off-the-derech individual who wanted things for himself, like a child who somebody stole his scooter and went crying to his mother. We must elevate our thinking. We must understand that Korach wore a black hat. He had a frock on. Korach was somebody that only wanted more Kedusha. He did see the Almighty at Har Sinai. He is a cousin of Moshe Rabbeinu. He just wanted more Kedusha. And the Mishnah testifies to this. The only difference between Hillel and Korach was that one was a fighting that was lishma, and one was not lishma. It was shalol lishma. Korach was a big tzaddik. Korach was a righteous individual. At least he started out like that. But because of, he fought, he argued, he engaged in disputation Shaloi lishma, with the wrong intentions. It led him to some dark places, and eventually, he paid the price. It can be a tough avoda, but it is well worth one's while when he wipes his brain of a lot of the plans and understandings of the weekly Parsha that he has developed and internalized from his youth. Every year anew, to read the Parsha and say, whoa, what's going to happen? Who is Korach? How could he do this? He's a hush of a person. Clearly, what is going on? And then get into the commentary. And from there, the Parsha sings an entirely different tune, and new pearls of wisdom sprout forth. And that brings us to the second idea, and an idea that is larger than life, and it sits here in a Rashi right underneath our noses. And it holds a very valuable lesson. When one actually gets into the story of Korach and him attacking Moshe and the leadership role that Moshe was, our melech, it's so cool. It's so impressive to watch how tastefully Moshe calms this mob. Because there's something weird in the world that, when there is a mob and a machlokas and everyone's jumping on the bandwagon, yeah, fire the rabbi, or yeah, that's bad, or whatever it is that this mob is murmuring and yelling about with their pitchforks, there's something so seductive and enticing about joining the mob. But Moshe, not fighting back, not pushing back, but just delaying. Let's do things tomorrow. Let's have some sort of event to show who's really in charge, not getting involved in this machlokas. And it's actually a pretty cool diuk, an inference in the Mishnah, that the difference between Hillel and Shammai, and it says, then the fight between Korach, and not Moshe, but it's actually Korach and his co-conspirators. Moshe was totally not involved in this machlokas, as we see from that Mishnah. And here's the pasuk. Right at the beginning of our Parsha, Vayishma Moshe, Vayipol Alpanav, after Korach has just launched his words of attack, Moshe falls onto his face. Zohar actually tells us he said tachanun. That's what it means to fall onto one's face. And Moshe spoke to Korach and to his other gathering partners. Lamor, saying, Boiker v'yoida Hashem es asher lo. In the morning, God will make known to who he is with. V'es hakadosh v'yekriv elav v'es asher yivchar bo yakriv elav. And whoever is really in charge, whoever's sacrifice will be accepted, then Hashem will have chosen that individual in this standoff. And Rashi finds an interesting word is used in our pasuk. In pushing off Korach, he says, we'll do it tomorrow. But instead of using the regular word of mochar, the regular word of tomorrow, let's have this standoff and feud, the pasuk says, Ve'el kol hadaso lemor boker, in the morning. And to explain Moshe's choice words, Rashi brings an unbelievable medrash. Says Rashi, umidrasho, on the word boker, Omar lohem Moshe. Moshe was telling them a very subtle message. Gevulos, chilek HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'olamo. Boundaries the Almighty has set up in his world. Yecholim atem lahapoch boker lo erev. Is it possible for one to flip-flop, to change the morning into evening? King tuchlu levatel es zu. Similarly, is it possible? Do you have the ability to nullify that which has been done? Aaron HaKohen has been selected. You're gunning for a stellar that is currently held by Aaron HaKohen, and the Medrash there says that Moshe was telling him about Aaron and how Aaron's position of Kohen Gadol, of high priest, was like the morning. And it would be physically impossible to change that, the same way you can't change morning into evening. The Medrash brings proof from a pasuk. Shene'emar, as the pasuk says, Vayihi erev vayihi voiker, vayavdel, and God separated. Kach vayavdel Aharon lahaktisho. The same separating between morning and evening was also attributed to the separating of Aaron HaKohen to his Kedusha Kohen-filled role, and it would be impossible for you to take it from him and become the Kohen. And just as a sidebar, you do see here that Korach was not only gunning for Moshe's position, but he also wanted the high priest Aaron HaKohen's position. I guess to capture all the more holiness. We see something absolutely astonishing here. We see that a person's position, his gifts, his inborn talents, those parts of a person that have been gifted from high above by the Almighty down to a person, they are so baked into a person, so unchangeable, that it's like trying to change the morning into evening. The same Vayavdel that you have been gifted, these gifts to become a Kohen of Aaron HaKohen's stature, is the same Vayavdel to Vayi'era Vayivoiker. The Medrash is informing us that the appointment of Aaron as the Kohen Gadol was a creation, no different from the creation of day and night. And people, when Hashem places us, a person, into a specific position of authority, of godless, Hashem molds the person to fit the position. It is literally impossible to change the mold of the different requirements of what you need to get that job done, to change that godless role. It's the hardware of a person. So Korach, give up. You have no shot, was Moshe Rabbeinu's subtle tip to him. Revolba brings this idea kama v'ka'am upon him many, many times. Now, I've recently become a huge fan of the shiurim and the chachma of another one of Revolba's talmidim, namely Rabbi Lawrence Keleman, an unbelievable chacham, Talmud chacham, and gadol. And he used Revolba's idea here, this medrash, this Rashi, this pasuk, to really bring clarity about the topic of labels, of different midos, different things that are baked into a person, and how to know what is a part of him and what is something that is changeable and something that is not. You see, there are two different aspects to a person's character. There are something called midos, and then there are something called netios. The Gemara talks about this in different places and rather many, many times. And the way that Rav Keleman, based on these Gemaras, explained the difference between the two of them is that midos, well, some are good and some are bad. Some are like kindness and giving, tov, a good midah. You live life with zerizos, with alacrity, a good midah. Then there are others, bad midos, anger and jealousy, taiva, lust, midos. The difference, some are morally good, and some are amoral, some are bad, some are really, they take a person down. And midos, says the Gemara, are changeable, and they must be changed because they are the prerequisite to Torah. Midos are the way that we give and take, have a masa umaton with the Eibishter and with other people. Midos makes ourselves into proper vessels for the Torah to work its powers inside of us. Midos is very much how we live our lives as Jews. And perhaps to have Torah without midos, one would have nothing. Torah im derech eretz. It's imperative that we have good midos. But netios, but the hardware of a person, those aren't necessarily good or bad. They just are. They are certain things that we like to enjoy. Not good or bad. Certain things that we are pulled to, not good or bad. Hyperactivity, Rav Keleman suggested. People are born with a little bit more energy, a little bit more. They like to move more than the average individual. It's not a good midah or bad per se. It just is. It's part of his hardware. Some people are more emotional. They are more into the singing and dancing part of Yiddishkeit. More Hasidic, a netiya. While others, they like Yiddishkeit more cold, more like a kalta litvak. They perhaps enjoy more to sit and to study the Torah or just to contemplate, to think, and it's not so high up on their levels of importance to have the singing and the dancing in their Yiddishkeit. A netiya. Something that's just how you were hardwired from birth. And Chazal tell us, a Gemara in Shabbos, that one who is born under the mazel of ma'adim will invariably spill blood. There are certain times or things that perhaps could lead to a person having an inborn netiya towards something. He cannot change this innate characteristic. But he can, says Rabbi Keleman, says Rav Volba, channel it into a specific occupation. If a person has an netiya towards blood, God forbid, or perhaps not God forbid, it's just how he is, he's born like that, well, be a shochet, be a mohel. Do something productive. Channel this netiya, channel this hyperactivity that you are inborn with towards exciting, simcha, Torah, a job that takes somebody that has hyperactivity to get the job done. A netiya, it is not about changing it, but about channeling it. A realization that there are software and hardware to a person. That when he does understand what his netios are, he's pulled towards blood like this individual that is cited in the Gemara. But he can not only, God forbid, fall off and become a murderer, but actually elevate himself to a spot that he is relied upon for our Korban Pesach, relied upon to provide meat for a siyum, relied upon to bring a young child into the bris, the covenant with the Almighty, the bris of Avram Avinu. That's how he's spilling blood. Ein lecha channeling netiya gedola mizu. And there's a science and there's a real avodah that we need to be involved in. It's a chachma of trying to figure out, is this a midah, and is it good, so I should double down on it? Or is this a midah, and it's bad, and I can change it, and I have the free will to get rid of it? Or is it part of my hardware, part of my makeup? I am antsy. I am someone that is hyperactive. And therefore, ripping that out of a person would be like ripping the hardware out of a computer, and it would just malfunction. It would be left with nothing. The goal? To clarify. Is this a midah, or is it a netiya? And if it's not necessarily good or bad, that's the dead giveaway. That is a netiya, because they just are. And step 2 is to channel that for good things. If you're someone that really likes order, somebody that really likes Seder, well then, that just is. As long as it's not getting in the way and inhibiting Avodas Hashem, well then, I imagine it could be channeled and used for consistent, daily, timely Torah learning or davening or organizing of one's schedule and organizing of one's mind. It's an atiyah, just is. And trying to change that would be like what Korach was trying to do and change what Aaron HaKohen had been hardwired to do, what role he was hardwired into. It would be like Vayavdel. It would be like trying to change between Vayi Erev, Vayi Boker, changing the morning into night. Chazal, they tell us in Bereshis Rabbah that when Shmuel HaNavi came to anoint David HaMelech, the greatest king, perhaps one of the greatest leaders of the Jewish people, Shmuel was concerned because David had a certain ruddy complexion, certain redness. Chazal tell us red hair, and it looked like Esav, and it was indicative of a natural tendency of a thirst for blood. Perhaps that's not fitting to become the next king. And then Chazal say that Shmuel saw his fine-looking eyes, and that signified that yes, blood would be spilled by the hands of the great David HaMelech, but it would only be with the consent of the Sanhedrin through the eyes, as they are called, of the nation. The Sanhedrin are the Einayim. David HaMelech, yes, killed, but channeled it to kill for righteousness, for truth, and for the Almighty. This is a perfect and classic example of an atiyah channeled perfectly, immaculately. And every single person is born with immutable tendencies. And the question is, how you channel them. This idea gave me a lot of peace. It's very helpful to know that, number one, any midah struggle, if it is something that actually gets one into trouble frequently, and it's something that is just inherently ra, it is malleable, fixable. We have bechira to change it. And a good midah, one should be excited about it and double down and promote it and build it inside of himself. That free will there is a very heartening, exciting new insight. But perhaps even more helpful, more exciting is this netiya of art. There are parts of a person that one cannot change. And if you do, you will just ruin your hardware and take out the motherboard from your DNA of how Hashem created you. With the acceptance and the knowledge that this is how I've been born, it is not bad. This is something that I've been gifted to channel it in the right direction for my avodas Hashem. With that clarity, it can be calming and it can be exciting, relieving, and encouraging. So in 2023, when it certainly feels like there's a common practice or a fad to label people or diagnose individuals and kind of lock them into this is how life is? Number one, the Torah, it seems like the approach would be that if it's an inherently bad thing, if it traps a person, well then it's changeable. It's a midah. Midos are flexible and can be altered. If it's good, definitely. A diagnosis of something good, one can move that, promote that, and build that. And this can be done. It really can be. The Gedolim have often educated and told people with enough hard work, one can fix and rewire one's brain. With enough professional therapy, with enough personal, meditating, learning, studying, Mesilas Yesharim. Maybe it's whatever the Gedolim would educate in the personal scenario with medication, but it can always work to mold and to change an inborn, gifted, even if it is inborn, midah, because it's a midah. And midos can be changed, edited, and substituted. It's exciting to know that a person has that hope, that midos can change with enough hard work and determination, and a whole lot of siyata d'shmaya. But what about netios? What about netia? Something that is unable to be changed. And then it does get a person into trouble. It does make Yiddishkeit hard. And he has been wired in a way that is maybe too hyperactive and it's not enjoyable so much. It might feel like a very lonely place. Rabbi Keleman, he remembered his great-great-grandmother, and it just so happens that we also have the same great-great-grandmother who had a netia that was blocking her, impeding her from becoming the mother of Klal Yisrael. It was literally impossible, yet something happened. And it gives us hope. Her name was Sarah Imenu. She was supposed to be the mother of Klal Yisrael, yet the netia, the baked in part of her life, her DNA, was that she did not have a womb. She could not give birth. She was infertile. What happens now when a netia, someone's mazel, impedes them from proper avodas Hashem, or perhaps mothering the future generation of Klal Yisrael? What did she do? What did she do? She prayed, and she prayed, and she prayed. You see, Klal Yisrael has such a close relationship with the Almighty. Something is very, very unique and special about the Am HaNivchar's relationship with the Creator of the world. Sarah Imenu, with enough prayer, with enough tefillah, with enough bikesh. Korov Hashem l'chol koirav. God is close to anyone who calls him, inasmuch as that it is l'chol asher yikra'uhu ve'emes. You cry out, you pray with truth. Tati, I need you. Then miracles happen. She gave birth without a womb, without the ability to give birth. She gave birth. I don't know if she got a womb and then gave birth or just she gave birth. It doesn't matter how, because we work as Jews differently. Miracles are not unlikely. Miracles happen daily for Jewish people. Ein mazal Yisrael. There are no omens for the Jewish people. We change. We can wiggle out of them. Create new mazel, it sounds like. Crazy things happen when a person has heartfelt tefillos to the Almighty. So while every person is born with certain immutable tendencies, and if God forbid, he's trying to channel them in the right direction, but something keeps getting in the way, his DNA keeps messing up, it sounds like with enough hishadlus, some intense trying, maybe it means therapy, you talk to your rabbis, you figure out what is the right hishadlus, what should I be doing? But then a korav Hashem l'chol korav l'chol asher yikra'u ve'emes, a crying of Shemona Esrei, a praying, a storming the heavens. Hashem, I need your help. Then miracles happen. Mazel changes. Netios flip-flop. And peace and success is had. This is what Rav Keleman gave over in a shir, and this insight can be so empowering. There is so much hope. There is so much work to be done and so much praying to be had. So now, back at the ranch, let's ask, what could Korach have done? After all, Tuchlu levatel azu shenem v'yever v'yiker v'yavdel kach v'yavdel an lakdishay. There was no shot. Korach never had a chance that he was going to be the high priest like Aaron HaKohen. What could he have done? And after all, we have just come to this conclusion that Korach was in it for ruchnius. He wanted to be a bigger tzaddik. How could he have reached such a level? Perhaps we can infer and answer that he should have prayed. A person, if he wants more connection, perhaps. No, not perhaps. Tefillah is always the answer. Don't launch a mutiny, a rebellion, and a revolt. Open up your siddur. Open up your tehillim and pray and pray and pray with tears. We all have different midos and different netios. Midos can be changed, worked on, and at times even eradicated. And netios are part of us. They're part of what makes us us. Your fingerprint, it cannot be changed. And when a person clarifies that this is a part of my avodas Hashem, let me then channel that. Let me bring my excitement, hyperactivity into my avodas Hashem to be the greatest camp counselor and the greatest promoter of Torah and public speaker and mover and shaker that the world has ever seen. And if this netiya should get in the way, then you do your shtadlus. You do what you need to do and how Hashem set up the world to get the help, to put in the work. But then you pray and you pray and you pray and you pray and you pray, because that is the way that miracles happen. Friends, there is lots of hope. There's lots of excitement. And there is lots to be done. I hope we will do some thinking. We will clarify what is a midah and what is a netiya. And we will eradicate the bad midos, build up the good midos, channel the good netiyos, that hardwired DNA that we have, and then pray and pray and pray that the Almighty remove the tough netiyos and that we all have Yeshuos, the salvations, the non-miraculous, often occurring miraculous salvations that a lot of us are looking forward to.